My name's Ethan. I'm 35, a software developer living in Seattle. My life was simple but good, or at least I thought it was. I had a steady job, a nice apartment, and a wife I adored. Her name was Rachel, and we'd been married for 3 years. Things weren't perfect, but we were a team. We had the usual ups and downs, but nothing that ever made me think our foundation could crack. Rachel had always been the ambitious type. She worked in marketing and was damn good at it. She was the kind of person who could light up a room with her energy, always charming and confident. I loved that about her, how she could dream big and make things happen. But lately, it felt like her dreams were pulling her in a direction that didn't include me. It started a few months ago when Rachel decided to go all in on fitness. She'd always been health conscious, but now it became her obsession. She wasn't just hitting the gym a couple of times a week. She was there every day, sometimes twice a day. She hired a personal trainer named Lucas, this tall, chiseled guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a fitness magazine. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I didn't want to be the insecure husband, so I supported her. I thought, hey, it's great she's prioritizing her health. At first, it was fine. She seemed happier, more energized. She'd talk about her workouts and show me the progress she was making. But soon, things started to shift. Rachel became distant, not in an obvious way, but in the subtle, insidious way that makes you question if you're imagining it. She'd come home late from her sessions with Lucas, claiming she'd stayed to stretch or do extra cardio. She started posting more on social media, pictures of herself at the gym, progress shots, motivational quotes about growth and self-love. The captions were all about her personal journey, her transformation, with little mention of us as a couple. One night I suggested we have a date night. We hadn't spent much time together lately, and I thought it might help us reconnect. But Rachel brushed me off. "I can't, Ethan," she said, barely looking up from her phone. "I have an early session with Lucas tomorrow, and I don't want to mess up my routine." That hurt more than I let on. It wasn't just about the missed date night. It was the fact that she didn't even consider it. She was so wrapped up in this new version of herself that it felt like I didn't fit into her plans anymore. I tried to push the thought aside, convincing myself that it was just a phase, that things would go back to normal once she hit her goals. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her. The real cracks started to show one morning over breakfast. I was nursing my coffee, still half asleep, while Rachel was sipping one of her green smoothies, kale, spinach, chia seeds, the works. She was scrolling through her phone, her face serious. "I deserve more in life," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. I blinked, not sure if I'd heard her right. More of what? She put her smoothie down and looked at me, her expression unreadable. Us, this life, it's holding me back. I laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke, but her face didn't change. "I'm serious, Ethan. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I want a divorce." Her words hit me like a truck. I stared at her, waiting for her to take it back, to laugh and say she was kidding. But she didn't. "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Where is this coming from?" Rachel sighed, like I was a child who didn't understand something simple. "I've been working on myself, trying to become the best version of me. And I've realized this marriage doesn't fit into that. I want more than this routine, this apartment, this life. I want more than you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the woman I'd built a life with, who I'd loved unconditionally. And now she was throwing it all away like it was nothing? "Rachel, we're supposed to be a team. You don't just get to decide this on your own." "I've already decided," she said, her voice cold. "I've started the paperwork." And, just like that, she grabbed her gym bag and walked out the door. I sat there in stunned silence, staring at the empty glass of green sludge she'd left behind. My mind was spinning. How could she do this? Was I really that blind to what was happening? That day at work, I was useless. I couldn't focus, couldn't think about anything except Rachel's words. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to make sense of it. We'd had arguments before, sure, but nothing that made me think we were on the verge of falling apart. And now she was leaving me? For what? For some fantasy life she thought she deserved? Over the next few days, things got worse. Rachel and I barely spoke. She came home late every night, and when she was there, she was glued to her phone. I started noticing more and more red flags. Her laughing at texts she wouldn't show me, the way she'd turn her screen away when I walked by. I wasn't stupid. I knew Lucas was more than just her trainer, but I didn't have the proof. Not yet. One evening, I came home early from work and heard her on the phone. She was in the bedroom, her voice low but excited. "I'm so glad I finally made the decision," she said. "I feel free, you know? Like I'm finally living for me." I froze. She was talking about me. About us. About leaving me like it was some grand act of self-discovery. My hands clenched in a fist as I stood there, listening to her plan her new life without me. I couldn't take it anymore. That night, I confronted her. "Are you seeing someone else?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. Rachel didn't even flinch. "That's not the point, Ethan. The point is I need to do what's best for me." She didn't deny it. She didn't even try to lie. And that told me everything I needed to know. After that night, things between Rachel and me spiraled even further. We were like two strangers sharing the same space. She'd barely talk to me, and when she did, her words felt rehearsed, distant. I started paying closer attention, watching for patterns, looking for clues. If she wasn't going to admit to what I already suspected, then I'd find out for myself. A part of me didn't want to face the truth. I wanted to believe this was just a rough patch, that we could fix it somehow. But deep down, I knew better. There was something or someone else driving her away. One evening, after Rachel had left for one of her late-night workouts, I decided to look through her phone. I didn't want to be that guy, but at this point, I didn't care about playing fair. I needed answers. She'd been careless, leaving her phone on the kitchen counter while it charged. My hands trembled as I unlocked it using the code I still remembered from better times. The messages were all there, plain as day. "Lucas, can't stop thinking about last night." "Rachel, me too. I wish we didn't have to hide." My stomach churned as I scrolled through the rest of their conversation. There were dozens of messages, flirty, intimate, downright explicit. They'd been meeting up for weeks, maybe months. Late-night gym sessions weren't about fitness. They were just a convenient excuse. There were photos, too. Rachel, smiling in front of a mirror at the gym, her hand brushing Lucas's chest. Another one of them at some rooftop bar I didn't recognize, laughing together like they didn't have a care in the world. She looked happy in those pictures, happier than she'd been with me in a long time. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Everything I'd feared, everything I'd been trying to convince myself wasn't true, was staring me in the face. She wasn't just leaving me, she was replacing me. When Rachel came home that night, I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just sat there on the couch, pretending to watch TV while she breezed past me with her gym bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't even ask how my day was. That's when I realized how far gone we were. She didn't care about me anymore. Not really. She was so wrapped up in her new life, her new relationship, that I was nothing more than an inconvenience she hadn't figured out how to get rid of yet. The next day, I started planning. If Rachel wanted out of this marriage, fine, but I wasn't going to make it easy for her. That Friday, she mentioned she'd be working late. Another red flag. Rachel rarely worked late, and when she did, she'd usually let me know in advance. This time, her explanation felt rushed, like she was covering for something. "I've got a client meeting downtown," she said over breakfast, barely looking up from her phone. "Late on a Friday? That's rough." I replied, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, well, that's the job." I didn't push her. Instead, I waited until she left for work and called one of my friends, Tom. He wasn't just a buddy. He was a private investigator. I explained the situation, and he didn't hesitate to help. Tom was good at what he did, discreet, thorough, and quick. That evening, while Rachel was supposedly at her client meeting, Tom called me. "Ethan, you're not going to like this," he said, his voice serious. "Just tell me," I said, bracing myself. "She's not at a meeting. She's at a hotel, the Westfield downtown, room 817, and she's not alone." My heart sank. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was fact. Rachel was with Lucas. I wanted to drive down there, storm into that hotel room, and confront them both. But Tom talked me out of it. "You got to play it smart, man. Don't give her the upper hand. Get your evidence, then decide what to do." He was right. I needed to think this through. When Rachel came home later that night, I was waiting for her. She looked surprised to see me awake. "Hey," she said, setting her bag down. "You're up late." "Yeah, Couldn't sleep, I replied, forcing a smile. How was your meeting? It was fine, she said, avoiding eye contact. Long, though. I am exhausted. She headed straight for the shower without another word. I sat there on the couch, staring at the wall, wondering how much longer I could keep up this charade. Over the next few days, I started gathering evidence. Texts, photos, anything that could prove Rachel's infidelity. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I needed it. If she was going to blow up our marriage, I wasn't going to walk away empty-handed. The breaking point came a week later. Rachel was getting ready for another gym session with Lucas, and I decided to follow her. I waited a few minutes after she left, then grabbed my keys and drove to the gym. Sure enough, her car was there, parked next to Lucas's. But they weren't inside. I checked the windows, peeking into the workout area, the lobby, even the parking lot. They were nowhere to be found. Frustrated, I was about to leave when I noticed a back door leading to a storage area. I crept around the corner and froze. There they were, pressed up against the wall, completely absorbed in each other. Rachel's hands were tangled in Lucas's hair, his arms wrapped around her like she was the only thing that mattered. They didn't see me. They were too caught up in their moment to notice the husband watching from the shadows. I stood there, torn between anger and heartbreak, until I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and walked away, my mind racing with what I'd just seen. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a rough patch. Rachel wasn't coming back to me, and now I had to decide what to do next. I spent the weekend in a haze, going over everything I'd learned. Every smile she'd given me in the past few months felt like a lie. Every "I love you" was hollow, just words to keep me in the dark. And now that I had seen them together, I couldn't unsee it. But what ate at me most wasn't just her betrayal. It was the way she carried on like nothing was wrong. Rachel would come home, kiss me on the cheek, and ask what was for dinner as if she hadn't been with another man just hours earlier. The sheer audacity of it fueled my anger. By Sunday night, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to let this drag on any longer. Monday morning, Rachel sat at the dining table, sipping her coffee and scrolling through her phone. She looked so calm, so normal, almost made me sick. I was thinking we should go out to dinner Friday night, she said casually, not looking up. It's been a while since we had a date night. I stared at her, my grip tightening on the mug in my hand. A date night? Was she serious? That sounds nice, I said, forcing a smile. Great. I'll make a reservation, she said, finally glancing up at me with that practiced grin of hers. I nodded and left for work, knowing full well that Friday wouldn't be the romantic evening she had in mind. The week crawled by. I kept up the facade, acting like everything was fine while I prepared for the confrontation. I went back and forth on how to handle it. Should I confront her in private, where we could have it out without an audience? Or should I pull the rug out from under her in the most public, humiliating way possible? In the end, I chose somewhere in between. By Friday, everything was set. I made a reservation at her favorite restaurant, the same place where we'd celebrated our anniversary last year. It was a small, cozy spot, intimate, but not so crowded that we couldn't have a serious conversation. When Rachel walked into the living room that evening, dressed to the nines in a black dress that clung to her in all the right places, I felt a pang of sadness. This was the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. But now, all I could see was a stranger. You look amazing, I said, masking my emotions. Thanks, she said with a smile, twirling for effect. You're not looking too bad yourself. We drove to the restaurant in silence, the tension in the car thick enough to cut with a knife. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she was just used to it by now. Once we were seated, I tried to keep the conversation light. We talked about work, the weather, even her gym sessions. She lied so easily, it was almost impressive. About halfway through the meal, I decided it was time. You know, I said, leaning back in my chair, I've been thinking a lot about us lately. Rachel looked up from her plate, her expression cautious. Oh, what about us? About how things have changed, I said, choosing my words carefully. How distant we've been. I mean, I get it, life gets busy and relationships take work. But I feel like there's more to it than that. She frowned, setting her fork down. Ethan, if something's bothering you, just say it. Don't dance around it. All right, I said, leaning forward. Who's Lucas? Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. But then she recovered, her face hardening. Lucas? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Rachel, I said, my voice low but firm. I've seen the texts, the photos. I know about the hotel, the gym, all of it. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. How long has it been going on? I asked, my tone sharp. She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. Ethan, how long? I snapped, cutting her off. A few months, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Why, Rachel? Was I not enough for you? Did our marriage mean so little that you could just throw it away for some guy at the gym? It wasn't like that, she said, her voice trembling. I never meant for it to happen. It just did. That's not an excuse, I said, my anger rising. You made a choice, Rachel. Over and over again, you chose to lie to me, to betray me. And for what? Was he worth it? She didn't answer. The silence between us was deafening. Other diners were starting to notice, their curious glances making my skin crawl. But I didn't care. You know what hurts the most? I said, my voice breaking. It's not even the cheating. It's the fact that you didn't have the decency to be honest with me. You could have told me you were unhappy, that you wanted out. But instead, you lied. You made me think we still had a chance, while you were out building a life with someone else. Tears streamed down her face now, but I felt no sympathy. She'd made her bed. Ethan, I'm sorry, she said, reaching across the table for my hand. I pulled away. It's too late for that. The waiter approached our table, his expression uneasy. Is everything all right here? I forced a smile. We're fine. Just a check, please. The drive home was silent. Rachel didn't say a word, and I didn't feel like filling the void. When we got home, she tried to talk to me, but I cut her off. I'm done, Rachel. You can stay here tonight, but I want you gone by tomorrow. I'll start the divorce paperwork in the morning. She looked at me like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she nodded and walked away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. As I sat on the couch that night, staring at the blank TV screen, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, relief. It was over, or so I thought. Saturday morning came with an eerie calm. Rachel hadn't said much since our confrontation. She spent the night in the guest room, and I barely slept at all. My mind was spinning with everything I'd said, everything she'd admitted to, and the realization that my marriage was officially over. I woke up early, determined to take control of the situation. If Rachel was leaving, I wanted it done quickly. I wanted my home, my life back. When I walked downstairs, she was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Her makeup was smudged, and her eyes were puffy from crying. Morning, I said, my voice flat. Ethan, please, she said, her voice cracking. Can we just talk? One last time? There's nothing left to say, I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. But she didn't give up. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But this isn't how it was supposed to go. I didn't plan for any of this, Ethan. I swear. I turned to her, my patience wearing thin. What exactly didn't you plan, Rachel? Sleeping with another man? Lying to me for months? Breaking my heart? Because from where I'm standing, you planned it pretty damn well. She flinched at my words, but held her ground. I'm not trying to excuse what I did. I know I hurt you, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But there's more to this than you know. I laughed bitterly. Oh, I'm sure there is. Go ahead, Rachel. Enlighten me. She hesitated, her hands shaking as she gripped her coffee mug. Lucas isn't just some random guy from the gym. I raised an eyebrow, my stomach tightening. What's that supposed to mean? She looked down at the table, her voice barely above a whisper. He's someone I knew before you. Before us. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I stared at her, struggling to process what she'd just said. Before us? What the hell are you talking about? Rachel took a deep breath, tears streaming down her face. Ethan, Lucas is my ex-fiancé. The room spun. I had to steady myself against the counter. Your ex-fiancé? She nodded, wiping her eyes. We were together for years, long before I met you. Things ended badly, and I thought I'd never see him again. But then he showed up at the gym. At first, it was just small talk, catching up, but she trailed off, her voice breaking. "But what?" I demanded, my anger flaring again. "But then all those old feelings came rushing back," she said, her voice trembling. "I know it was wrong, Ethan. I knew it the whole time, but I couldn't stop myself." I stared at her, my chest heaving. "So you're telling me you've been sneaking around with your ex-fiancé? The guy you were going to marry before me?" "Yes," she whispered. It all made sense now. The intensity, the secrecy, the way she'd been acting like she was torn between two worlds. She wasn't just cheating. She was rekindling something she'd never truly let go of. "Why didn't you tell me about him?" I asked, my voice raw. "You never mentioned an ex-fiancé. Not once in all the years we've been together." "Because I didn't want to drag that part of my life into our relationship," she said, her voice pleading. "It was over, Ethan. I moved on. Or at least I thought I did. But when he came back..." I cut her off, unable to listen to any more. "You didn't move on, Rachel. If you had, none of this would have happened." She didn't respond, just sat there silently as I paced the kitchen, my thoughts racing. "Does he know?" I asked suddenly, stopping in my tracks. She frowned. "Does he know what?" "Lucas. Does he know you're married? Does he know about me?" Her silence was all the answer I needed. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "So not only were you lying to me, but you were lying to him too?" "I didn't know how to tell him," she said, her voice small. "I was scared." "Scared of what, Rachel? That he'd leave you again? That he wouldn't want to be with you if he knew you were married?" She didn't answer. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Unbelievable. You've been living a double life this whole time. And for what? To keep your options open?" "That's not fair," she said, her voice rising. "I didn't plan for any of this to happen, Ethan. I didn't want to hurt anyone." "Well, congratulations," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because you managed to hurt everyone involved." The rest of the day was a blur. Rachel packed a bag and left, saying she'd stay with a friend while we figured out the next steps. I didn't ask where she was going, and I didn't care. But as I sat alone in the empty house that night, I couldn't help but wonder what Lucas thought of all this. Did he know the real Rachel? Or was she lying to him too, spinning the same web of half-truths and excuses? And then a thought struck me, a dark, unsettling thought that I couldn't shake. What if Lucas wasn't the only one? I spent the next day in a haze, the quiet of the house suffocating me. Every room felt like a ghost of our life together. Memories were everywhere. Her laugh in the kitchen, the way she'd curl up on the couch, the quiet moments in bed before sleep. All of it tainted now. Rachel was gone, and I wasn't sure what to feel. Relief? Anger? Grief? I kept replaying her words, trying to make sense of everything. Her betrayal. Lucas. The life she'd hidden from me. And the gnawing feeling that there was still more I didn't know. By mid-afternoon, I'd had enough. I needed closure. Answers. Something to help me move forward. So I did what I swore I'd never do. I went through her things. Her laptop was on the desk in the guest room, where she'd left it. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the keyboard. But then I opened it, the screen lighting up with her login screen. I knew her password. Of course I did. We'd always trusted each other. Or at least I thought we had. The laptop unlocked, and I dove in. Emails. Messages. Photos. I searched for anything that would tell me the truth about her and Lucas. And it didn't take long to find it. There were emails dating back months. Sweet, flirty exchanges that escalated into something far more intimate. Plans to meet up. Hotel reservations. And then I found something else. A folder hidden deep in her files, labeled work. At first, I thought it was related to her job. But when I opened it, I realized it was something else entirely. Photos. Dozens of them. Of her. Some innocent selfies, pictures of her at the gym. But others weren't. My stomach churned as I clicked through them, the pieces falling into place. These weren't just for Lucas. This was something else entirely. I found more emails, this time with different men. Messages that left no doubt in my mind about what she'd been doing. Rachel hadn't just been cheating with Lucas. She'd been meeting other men too. Regularly. And from what I could piece together, it wasn't just for fun. She was being paid. The realization hit me like a freight train. Rachel, my wife, the woman I'd loved and trusted, had been living a double life in more ways than one. The gym, the late nights, the new clothes, it all made sense now. She wasn't just reconnecting with an old flame. She was running some kind of operation right under my nose. I felt sick, betrayed, humiliated. I slammed the laptop shut and paced the room, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do with this information? Confront her? Expose her? Call the police? I didn't know where to start. That night, Rachel called. "Ethan," she said, her voice hesitant. I wanted to check on you. Are you okay?" I laughed bitterly. "Am I okay? Seriously, Rachel? You've got some nerve." She sighed. "I know you're angry. I know I've hurt you. But—" "Save it," I snapped. "I went through your laptop, Rachel. I know everything." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I don't just know about Lucas," I continued. "I know about the other men, the photos, the emails, all of it. Ethan, I can explain." "No." I cut her off. "You don't get to explain. You don't get to justify this. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And for what? Money? Attention?" She started to cry, but I didn't care. I was done feeling sorry for her. "You could have told me the truth," I said, my voice shaking. "You could have come clean, but instead you lied. Over and over again. You made me believe in a life that was never real." "I never wanted to hurt you," she sobbed. "Yeah? Well, congratulations," I said coldly. "Because you did. You destroyed everything we had. And for what? So you could live out some twisted fantasy? So you could make a few bucks on the side?" She didn't respond. "I want you out of my life," I said firmly. "For good. I'll file the divorce papers this week. Don't bother coming back here. I don't want to see you again." "Ethan, please." I hung up. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and sleepless nights. I told a few close friends what had happened, and their support kept me going. But the hardest part was letting go of the life I thought I had, the woman I thought I knew. Rachel had made her choices, and now I was making mine. Weeks later, as I stood in the nearly empty house, I felt a strange sense of peace. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was my life now. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. Rachel was gone. The lies were exposed. And I was finally free.